Namaste and welcome to our channel Indian History and Culture. Do like our channel, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon. Often when we talk about the Indian freedom movement, the focus is always on the non-violent Gandhian phase. And a grave injustice is done to one of the glorious chapters of the Indian freedom struggle, the role of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose and the Indian National Army in liberating India in 1947. The struggle from 1944 to 1947 is a forgotten chapter. Let us try to understand that in this episode. The Indian National Army was formed in Southeast Asia. Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose is remembered most for the establishment of the INA. But did you know that he did not establish the Indian National Army? It was actually formed by Captain Mohan Singh. Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose arrived in Southeast Asia all the way from Europe. The historic escape of Subhas Chandra Bose from British captivity, the house arrest that he was in from Calcutta all the way to Berlin, is a very known episode. After landing in Germany, he tried to create India's Liberation Army in Germany. It was the Free India Legion that was formed of the Indian prisoners of war that were there with Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. But when the hopes of coming to India through the Russian path faded away, because as we know, Nazi Germany invaded Russia and Russia became an enemy state for the Germans, Subhas Chandra Bose did not have any other way but to come to Asia to re-raise another army for liberating India. He came over to Southeast Asia and took over the charge and leadership of the Indian National Army. It was in Singapore that the headquarters of this Azad Hind Fauj was established. But he went a step ahead. He established a government in exile, Arzi Hukumat-e-Azad Hind, popularly called as the Azad Hind government. It was the Azad Hind government which was to be the civilian control mechanism over the Indian National Army. The INA was established on the principles of nationalism and secularism. The doctrine of Qaumi Ekta, communal unity, was a steadfast doctrine in which every soldier of INA believed in. The Indian National Army, though it was a part of the Japanese imperial scheme, made it clear that it will not bow down to the pressures of the Japanese leadership. With Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose as the head of the Indian National Army, that message was conveyed to Tokyo. Tokyo and Japan had a very different relationship with the other freedom fighters and the other freedom leaders of Southeast Asia. But with Subhas Chandra Bose, it was a different relation. He was treated on equal terms. Indian National Army was not to be a puppet in the hands of the Japanese armed forces. The plan for invading India was afoot. With the capture of Burma, you have the Japanese army and in tow the Indian National Army, which came close to the Indian frontiers. The Battle of Imphal and the Battle of Kohima are significant stories to be narrated, but are often forgotten in the glorious saga of India's freedom movement. India had come within the striking distance. India was about to overpower the British forces, but the Indian National Army was forced to withdraw. The stretched lines of supply, monsoon which had created a havoc on these supply lines, the Americans who were closing to the Japanese mainland all pushed for withdrawal of the Indian National Army and the Japanese forces from the northeast frontier. But by this time, we do see that Moirang was liberated. The Indian tricolor of the Azad Hind Fauj was planted in Moirang in today's Manipur. The administration of Andaman and Nicobar Islands was handed over to the Azad Hind government, renamed as the Shaheed and Swaraj Islands. It is in the recent times that the government of India decided to rename these islands as Shaheed and Swaraj to commemorate the contributions of Netaji Bose and the brave men and women of the Indian National Army. The Indian National Army was significant from one more context, that it had women soldiers. Yes, you heard me rightly. It had women soldiers, an all-fighting women's regiment called as the Rani of Jhansi Regiment, inspired from the great revolutionary figure and the great rebel of 1857, Rani Lakshmibai. The Rani of Jhansi regiment was led by Captain Lakshmi Swaminathan. It was an all-fighting unit and not to be a supportive unit. Over here, we see not only an attempt at political revolution, but a social revolution as well. Though the Indian National Army did not succeed on the battlefields, it did succeed on the political field. The captured soldiers and officers of the INA were brought back to Delhi to be tried under the British law. They were tried of treason and were sentenced. The most important contribution of the Indian National Army was to spread patriotism and nationalism amongst the Indian soldiers of the British Indian Armed Forces. Inspired by the INA example, moved by the sentencing of the officers of the INA, there were mutinies which happened in the Royal Air Force and the Royal Indian Naval Mutiny, which took place in February 1946. Because of these mutinies in the Air Force and Navy, the British were compelled to send the cabinet mission to India. On 19th of February 1946, Attlee announced this cabinet mission, and as we know, a year later, independence dawned. This is an often forgotten fact. This is an often forgotten link between the Indian National Army and its role in the liberation of India in 1947. Let us always try to remember the brave soldiers and officers of INA.